Today we have a really special guest.
Wow.
Do you want to pause real quick and we'll say Casalú here?
Of course. I was deeply curious. There's only one frequency you're hearing on the radio. What if you want to support Latino culture and you're not?
There's a lot of unpack here. Like, what was exactly happening there?
What do you want to do?
Closing comments. I mean...
Great. Cheers.
Salud. Casalú. Today we have a really special guest here at the Casalú podcast. Isabella Acker, founder, creator, creative behind Tigre Studios, which is what she's most known from or for these days. But there's a lot of stories behind that we'll be talking about. And she was one of the first people we met here in Miami. And we wanted to make sure that she was one of the first people to be part of this vision of sharing the stories that elevate our culture and combine it with different ones. So today you're going to hear from an amazing guest, and I'm going to open it up to Easy. And we'll say Casalú here.
Of course. I'll join you. Great. Cheers. Salud.
Salud. Casalú.
Yes. So where do I start? I mean, my journey, my story. You know, when I moved to Miami like 12 years ago, I really realized like Miami is for the entrepreneur, and it's just like it's so many layers of getting to understand what's the ecosystem and the landscapes, not only for creatives, but so many industries, right? And I've got so passionate about one phrase that has always been my motto, which is building the Miami you want to live in. And I've realized in cualquier ciudad, but obviously Miami is our city, I've realized whatever you want to see, you have to be a stakeholder in creating. And specifically in the music scene, you know, at least when I started, I guess it was like 10 years ago, I started with unplugged sessions. I was curating little lineups. I was managing bands. I was writing about bands and really coming to understand, like, what is Miami's music scene? What are the areas of why people maybe don't go to shows? Why is the geography such a big part of touring? Understanding the obstacles in a way that allowed me to best understand how can I serve the city for the bands who are here, who want to be here, even like all the genres and why singer-songwriters feel defeated and leave Miami. I mean, I was part of, at the time when I was, you know, just starting, there was a whole thing, there was a Facebook group like, don't move to LA, and it was the thing, and everybody talked about that every 5 years musicians were leaving Miami and moving to LA.
No, and I think to that point, I mean, there's a lot of unpack here. I think so. You came to Miami a little over a decade ago.
Yeah.
Why? Like,
School.
What was exactly happening there?
I came down FIU, hospitality major, in events and hospitality, and really came to like understand the nightlife scene. That's how I started. And in the nightlife scene, I got very depressed, and I was like completely a fish out of water. Loved the entertainment and production side, the culture, and the Miami nightlife. I saw the worst of it in a way that is actually, I'm grateful for all the horrible things that I experienced. I mean, I don't even know if it's worth like mentioning. Everybody knows like the red rope life of Miami is like so degrading, and you feel no matter what side of it, you're just like a piece of shit, and it makes you feel like that any part of it, you know? And I feel like I'm so happy I saw that, because I understood why the people who were born and raised in Miami felt so ostracized as locals. Mm-hmm. And I built my business around locals, you know, and unlike everybody who's trying to cater to tourism, I'm like, nobody is talking about the entire demographic of people born and raised in Miami or living in Miami that don't have a way to congregate. Community was, now it's a buzzword, but back then it was like, what does that even mean? And how do people really engage in something like that? And I really felt passionate about building the culture more than a buzzword, the psychology around people feeling welcome somewhere. You know, Miami was really good at making people not feel welcome. And as a hospitality major, that went against all my core values, you know? That's why you'll know every single event that I've ever been a part of, and the ones that we're actually going to be partnering in, shout out to our Global Sounds concert series, they're free and open to the public, because I feel like there's something very important around people having access. And people can be curious, but they don't actually, you know, they need an entry point. you know? I mean, I was in college and I went down Lincoln Road with my resume and there was a nightlife conglomerate group. Don't need to name it. And I mean, I love my pain. I love my pain. I learned that in therapy. Therapy is my purpose, you know? I mean, pain is my purpose, which was a big thing. Like, I'm very passionate about community because of everything that I experienced. Yeah. And it was a starting point. And when I realized that Miami had that side, which was so revealing, I think, at 22 years old, what side, you know, what do you really care about? I really realized, like, I left Miami, I moved to Barcelona, I spent a lot of time there, I spent time meeting musicians and buskers and what the live music culture meant. And actually one of my friends who I did grow up in Atlanta with, she called me and she was like, I found the real Miami. It's the music scene and they're musicians. And she's like, come back. And I came back and I began to meet Raquel Sofia was one of the first singer-songwriters. You know, there was a whole scene of Suénalo, Jacob Jeffries. There was a lot of amazing musicians, Afro-Cuban funk to singer-songwriter to folk. I mean, it was such a diaspora of genres where I was like, wow, where would people know that this music scene exists? And what I began to realize is the music scene in Miami is very insular. Mm-hmm. And it's not because it's trying to be cliquey. It's just like they only speak to themselves because as marketers, their strength is them being on stage, not marketing, you know? And so it was an obvious thing for me that more people would be more excited about if they knew about it. Yeah. Which is everything in Miami I came to realize is an issue with information.
Like, when did you start being so knowledgeable and passionate about the different waves of music?
Well, I describe myself as un ciudadano del mundo. Always have been. My dad is American. My mom is a mix of everything. She's Lithuanian, Jewish, but family grew up in Chile, spent 20 years in Argentina, went to a French school in Peru. A true like melting pot, and I grew up in the States with spending many summers visiting my cousins in Santiago, went to Uruguay, spent time in Barcelona. Truly, like, I began to realize, as from an American perspective, went to an international school, I was deeply curious because I didn't grow up dancing salsa during Christmases, you know, like I would see the Latino culture in a way that I wanted to best understand the nuances, and I was so drawn to it since I was 16. I was going to Latin nightclubs, and I felt that there was something to be said around, like, God, there's so much variety and genre and layers, but you kind of there's only one frequency you're hearing on the radio. And there was something to be said that I just got like really nerdy with understanding all the nuances the way that you would know, about everything in American music. I got really big on in world music and Latino culture in general. I was like, wow, there's so much people don't tell you about unless you sit down and like 3 a.m. get people to tell you things, you know?
Yeah. So how did you go about it? So you say you got pretty nerdy. So you went to different nightclubs?
I learned merengue, I learned bachata, I learned salsa. And it was all through dance, and I began to be like, oh, wow, Monchi Alexandra. And Dominicans would be like, how do you know that? I'm like, because I ask questions, And then, Jerry Rivera. And it was like something that I took as almost part of fitting in was me really trying to understand, but then I really began to develop my own taste and what I really liked. And I realized, like, wow, I love an amazing horn section. Like, wow, like I really began to develop my own opinion outside of just like what was being played. And I took deep dives, And I think it's funny because we all are trying to fit in, or we're all trying to be so unique in what we're doing. But at different parts in your life, you want to feel a sense of acceptance. And I think making people feel welcome, it's funny because as a hospitality major, that's the core value, right? Is really making people feel seen and welcome, and the client is first. I have always wanted to do that in the music scene. And I've realized with people who don't speak Spanish, the Latin industry, the Latin music is so insular, My mom, you can talk to her straight on, she'll understand everything. My dad won't have any idea, and yet, like, they've been married 40 years. Right. And they can feel so different. And I began to feel also in our friend groups, which now all of our friend groups, people are from everywhere, people speak so many languages. A lot of my friends who would love the music that we fuck with, like, wouldn't know.
Right.
That's not going to show up on their homepage. How would they know about it? And so I'm like, it's like the Black Pumas, but in Spanish, or it's like this, but, you know, and you realize it's just about access and branding and packaging, and people are deeply curious if you make them feel part of the conversation. And I just feel like there's an entire audience that has really felt left out. You cannot target them on the internet, you know?
Mm-hmm. So how do you target them?
Great question. I mean, I feel like I'm trying to do that with Tigre. Tigre is like musical discovery for citizens of the world. And we're really about, educating sounds so nerdy. It's like really putting you on to some of your favorite music from music scenes around the world. We have writers that live in Buenos Aires and in Paris and in Mexico that write about music scenes from everywhere. Mm-hmm. And you kind of get more context and a deeper, richer understanding of like genres and trends that you don't even know exist, like such obscure things, you know? And you're just like, wow, we can live in a bubble of our own algorithm or what's on our newsfeed in a way that constructs your opinions, you know? And if you're in Miami, like, you think reggaeton is the only genre, you know? And I don't like to throw shade to reggaeton, but I do think there's something to be said that I know a lot of Latinos who don't care about reggaeton. And I know a lot of people who in general would just love to have a deeper understanding of what else. It's just like, it's fine, cool, this is the music of our time, but like show me, you know, a variety. Mm-hmm. And I think I get really excited about, you know, Latino culture is like so rich in so many ways, you know?
But I think my point is like our perception was one, and then you changed that when we met. So
yeah.
So what is Tigre?
I mean, we're a media platform, we're a label, we're such a medley of a lot of different spaces. I think post-COVID, I really decided to change. I formerly had a creative agency. Shout out, Prism Creative Group.
Shout out.
But I began to be like, what's the kind of life I want to live? Which I think collectively a lot of people began to be like, how do I want to spend my time? What are my gifts? What do I want to make money on? What do I feel connected to? And I've always known like music has been at the heartbeat of everything I've been doing, but I would, you know, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should. And I was a great project manager, and we would do block parties in neighborhoods. And, you know, I get really distracted because as an entrepreneur, like if I know a wonderful thing can exist in Miami, like an outdoor flea market or an outdoor movie night, I was drawn to doing it. After COVID, I was like, all right, I'm very clear that music has to be 90% of my work, surrounded by musicians, hosting them, being part of what it means to elevate the scene. But also, you know, I do feel like understanding Miami has an information problem. They don't know things are happening. They don't know about certain things. Why don't they have more context? I think when you go to cities like New York and Barcelona, there's a space of people being curious enough to where they'll spend $10 on a band they've never heard of because they're like, this will be dope. Miami doesn't have that. And I think there's something to be said around like, how do you build the culture? And so that's why we have a media platform. Right. And so writing and giving people context on music is super important to laying the kind of foundation to the culture and to, this is what's cool in Miami, this is what's cool out of Miami, this is the different music scenes in the El DF, this is, did you know that there's like obscure bass hall movement coming out of Amsterdam? Like all these different nuances become, I think, really interesting to help build the ecosystem so that artists can come here and you can have riskier bookings for artists who've never played Miami. So, you know, we are in a space of music discovery, from content to productions to recordings to working with clients, you know, in the industry and really like elevating that message. So that's kind of like a long-winded way of saying bit of everything.
Discovery is a big part of it, right? And how do you find those new sounds, those new talents, which may not be new? They may be like already established somewhere else, or they may be being craved.
I mean, I take deep rabbit holes, you know, the way you find anything that you love, right?
What would be a tutorial on like, here's how I find those?
I mean, shout out to the Spotify algorithm. It's real. My Discover Weekly is fire. But I also know that like if I like a certain artist, I will begin. I mean, I actively follow artists I look like when they're posting stuff, when they have audio tags on Instagram, I take a deep dive into like, you know, that curiosity that I have has led me to so many insane gems, you know, where you're like, R&B flamenco? What is this about? You know? And then before I know it, I'm like deep in Andalusia history around like all these things. And, you know, like so many producers and artists are sampling so many sounds, you know, Afrobeat to this and that. And so I'm like, I feel so excited around understanding the roots of that. So I just like, if they're like, if you like this, you like that. I mean, it's a very rabbit hole way of scrolling Spotify. Yeah.
So Spotify is a search.
But I still have Apple Music and Amazon, all the other partners we work with.
Catch up.
Yes.
You talk a lot about the Miami.
Yeah.
You want to live in.
Yeah.
Or we want to create, basically.
Yep.
What does that look like for you? What is the Miami that Isabella Acker wants to live?
I mean, it's the kind that people book vacations for, right? Like, why would you go to Buenos Aires, Barcelona, you know? It's like, I feel like there's so much. Like, don't you want to go see a kick-ass band in a grungy bar? Don't you want to go to a speakeasy dance party with some of the most amazing music, boleros infused with electronic, but like Fania fusions, you know? Like, I think about the kind of like parties that exist around the world, and I'm like, yeah, Miami needs weirder. Miami needs, you know, more sub-scenes. Miami needs, you know, more singer-songwriters, more dance parties, more salsa parties, you know? I think I get really excited around kind of a lot of the genres that just need a cultural uplift. And I feel like there's just so much work that can be done in Miami. When you come to Miami, there's a kind of party that you would expect that you're like, where is that one that I'm thinking of?
Right. A lot of people think of Miami as the cradle or as the epicenter of Latino music. Is that true? Like, what does that mean?
I mean, everything is all relative, right? Because it's also electronic, right? Look at Space and everything David Sinopoli has done with 3 Points. I mean, there's so many sub-scenes in Miami that I'm always like very humble to how much we don't know, you know, because there's so many micro scenes. It's just which scene is on your news feed. To me, it's like a paradigm for life too, right? Yeah. Like there's a certain scene that I'm in, a certain scene that you're in. Some of it cross-pollinates. Some of us are in different things. I think in terms of the Latin industry itself, yes, like it is the mecca of where like so many Latin hits are made and where a lot of the Latin industry is. But I think it just depends on like in what context you're asking.
Right. So obviously right now, like, and you and I both grew up in a space where reggaeton was like the focus. Right?
Yeah.
It's the focus. It's to a certain degree, at least the way I look at it, like what put Latino culture in front of the world. Yep. Even though it had existed before.
Of course.
I mean, we talk about the big salsa guys, you know, from Héctor Lavoe to Rubén Blades. Yep. Same thing across genres. Yeah. Right. But it's become, for different reasons that I really cannot explain, the genre that's put Latino culture front and center in front of the world.
I think it was Despacito if we had to pick a song. That was the song.
Yes. That actually is in the last podcast.
I'm sure.
About someone, Alejandro was telling the story of how he first heard Despacito and he was like, that's a hit.
I mean, I think historically everybody knows that became the time that it was all different. Yeah.
That was a tipping point. But there are more things that represent our culture.
For sure. Of course.
But I think people look at it in a sort of like in a timeline where it was like, oh, before it was merengue, before it was salsa.
Yeah.
Now it's reggaeton. What's next?
Well, I think even those trends, right? Those trends are built by brands, and movements, and who's playing the Super Bowl and who is doing. I mean, there's so many things that create what we come to know culture to be. What's on a radio, what's on a magazine, and, all of a sudden Bad Bunny is the only radio station, and every Uber sushi restaurant, no matter where you go, like that is what is, playing. And I think there's just something to be said around like, I am no trend predictor of the industry. I know that on my side, anytime there's that much emphasis on something, like the way you would say if you said I love you 100 times, it loses its meaning.
Right.
And so I think there is something to be said that, reggaeton has had this global massive boom, but it has been a frequency that's been, the sound for so many years now, that I think there is a big question around, what can the next sound be? I think people are really genre agnostic. I really come to realize, like, really nobody kind of stays in one space. People really listen to, like, weird emo indie music, but then they can also put on Bad Bunny and, it's the full gamut. I think there's something to be said around, I think people want to know fusions, I think, are really interesting. Okay. I think, there is a lot even in the electronic medleys. I think there's a lot in, I think horns and salsa is never going to go anywhere,
Do you have like examples? Like what are you listening to? Like what, I know you listen to a lot.
Yeah, so that's a loaded question.
That's a loaded question.
Don't make me pick my favorite child.
No, I'm more like, if you had to guess what you've had in the on repeat the most.
Yeah.
Let's say this past week.
Yeah.
What would that be?
So I actually, when I went to New York last week for literally a day to go see a show. Mm-hmm. She's an Israeli artist. Her name is Noga Erez.
Okay.
Have you?
Again, being educated.
She's really kick-ass. She is a mix of many things. And I could show you guys like 3 or 4 different videos where her sound is wildly different. But I would say, she's trap, but she just opened up for Florence and the Machine. And yet she's like incredibly lyrical. And the first time I saw her was a full 9-piece band. And it sounded like the Gorillaz. It was a lot of different sounds in one. And I'm like, I love when I find an artist that I cannot describe the sound because there's so much familiarity, but you can't pinpoint it because it's so unique in her space. So I've been really listening to her. She's really amazing. I was listening to La Dame Blanche, who we're going to be bringing next year.
Let's talk about that for a second.
Yeah. I'm like, are we going to gloss over the hurricane postponement?
Yeah. And I'm going to just let you, because you are the...
We should just like play her in the...
It's crazy. It is wild. I've never met her in person. I am just trying to like meet her in person when she comes.
Same.
And just be like, yo, you are the thing.
I know, it's true.
It's crazy. So if you haven't listened to La Dame Blanche, you will after this podcast.
Yes.
We'll definitely put it right here, a little bit of a clip. But the point is you build... you were the architect of the vision of bringing basically global sounds to Miami, and part of that vision was making those concerts free, and you allowed us and you opened the door to have Casalú to be a partner, to help Tigre in collaboration, and us as also you gave us the opportunity to be front and center to make that happen. So
I'm so grateful for. Make sure I let you guys know that.
I know, like that's the thing about partnerships, right? It's at the end of the day, it's like you gotta do stuff with people you fuck with.
Yeah, no, for sure. That was the coolest meeting. You guys were like, "What do you want to do?" Cool, let's throw some money and make that happen, and like really empower. And I think, for me, the space of that conversation was there's a massive need for very curated, elevated outdoor music series. You go to Central Park, and Summer Stage series, and you go to places around the world, and they have like public funding, private funding that are part of making these things possible for residents and people who live in our city. And I think, some of these things could be risky bookings if they were ticketed shows because they're first timing playing in Miami, and after La Dame Blanche we have Los Espíritus, which are Buenos Aires psychedelic blues. I don't know when this is coming out, but the show's November 2nd. And I think there's something to be said around there is people will show up, It's just a matter of creating a space where that exists. People are curious, It's almost like giving them context and letting them know about the sounds that they love. But this is the version in Cuba, or this is the version in Argentina. And I think, we're just getting started. There's so many massive, amazing indie and emerging artists around the world that haven't had their Miami debut. Like, what a treat that we get to bring them together in one of Miami's most beautiful outdoor venues, and you can smell the ocean breeze. You're like, come on, what more could I want? Drinking a cold Casalú, it's like the Miami vibe.
Yeah, exactly. And well, you found La Dame Blanche.
Yeah, I saw her at KXP. No, she's amazing. I mean, so she's been living in Paris, and just a Cuban powerhouse. It's hard to describe her sound as well. I mean, she's a flautist. She's hip hop, female empowerment. They say, I read one of the things about her. It was her sound summons the spirits. I guess that's a great way to describe too. Yeah. But I think these artists who've really found their lanes with medleys and fusions she also, I think, dabbles in trap and and beats a little more, and and does what she does so authentically. That lane is something that, to me, people can pick up on the authentic superpower part of that, and that was a sold out show, so I can't wait for that to happen next year. But I feel like we're just getting started with that, and I'm excited. Miami's gonna have a kick-ass concert series. I would say I'm an amazing curator, and that's always been in my business. My business cards always said curator of culture. It's super cute, but what does it actually mean? And I think when I've really psychoanalyzed that, I'm really great at finding incredibly talented people, bringing people together. We all get hired to do something super kick-ass, and then all of a sudden, that whole service is now something that I can say we do. And I've done that from the media business, from production, from events, from recordings. I'm freaking tired, I'm there's so many sides of the business, but I would say creative producer has been my common denominator of really what I do from a daily basis. But entrepreneurship has been, I'm so grateful for it. It's really shaped and molded me into the person, the woman, the kind of leader that I really want to be part of in this industry. I also feel like the industry that I saw when I was young and 23 was people were mean. There was a lot of ego,
So it's not like that anymore?
I think I try to remind people there's other options, I'm not saying that those people don't exist, but I think that it's important to have representation of different, and I try to pay it forward. I don't live a music industry badge life. I think I'm cooler than people because I can get into a show.
I appreciate that.
Of course. I mean, it's so antiquated, that shit of being an asshole. I had to go through all this shit. Now you guys are going to suffer. I mean, that to me is just part of why I wanted to be in this is who says, And I think part of changing that is you got to kind of be part of changing that domino effect. I've had a lot of aspiring women in the music business be wow, haven't seen women. And I'm why? Why haven't women seen women supporting women, or in general, just a general sense of humanity. And I think there's just a lot of ego in this industry, and that will always be there. But just that's there, so is kindness, you know? So it's literally just a choice how we decide to move in different spaces.
You mentioned that you had, even in that context, you had felt imposter syndrome.
Duh. Who hasn't had that?
Well,
come on.
Start a company and you'll feel it.
Of course. You're cool. I don't know anything about what I just
tattooed
sold.
Right here.
Yeah, dude, everybody.
What,
You've heard the story of the blazer, no?
You gotta tell it.
The story of the blazer is someone comes in and they're I'd love to buy a blazer. Great. Like, absolutely. I'll be ready by tomorrow. Turns around, what's a blazer? Like, I have constantly built my business and my career around that. And it's funny because that's why I'm also really great at finding people and partners and, you know, people who are really talented at what they do. Is like, I think I know how to build trust with clients. I know how to high level understand strategy, objectives. What are we really trying to accomplish beyond the core deliverable? What's the psychology around it? Where is the loyalty and building community? Like, I know that I'm great at building a brand. And I think there's like so much in that I get really excited about. But the part of the core business, I can always reinvent myself, you know?
Yeah, claro, 100%.
Which is what you're doing too.
That's what we're doing. but to that point, in the case of Tigre, so brand, like there is a graphic component to it, there is a lifestyle, a message, a vibe to it. What is the Tigre brand? Why Tigre, by the way? Like, if you want to tell people.
I mean, it's my spirit animal. It was one of those things where, why apple, you know?
Right. Beautiful.
I mean, it was just, I felt a connection to, it had a lot of like the symbolism of what I was calling in that year, and it just felt really connected to that.
So you know this, right? Like, our whole slogan is Nuestra para todos.
Yeah.
Right? So it is, because we can't escape from it, our culture, like in the case of Casalú.
Yeah.
Right? Like, we grew up with it, and, you know, I can't change where I come from and what I lived. But we saw something different. I mean, you're talking to 3 graduates from North Carolina.
Yeah. I'm always like, why North Carolina?
It's so weird, right? And it was like, the frustration was like, how do we stop being Latinos for Latinos and we become Latinos for the world?
Yeah. Amazing. What a beautiful paradigm shift. Because that narrative wasn't happening.
Yeah.
Which I think is powerful, you know? There's a lot in the inclusion. And there's still like so much you're doing to empower and rep the culture, but bring people in on the conversation, you know?
That's why we get excited about all these different acts. I mean, music, we look at history, right? It's always been that first indicator, kind of like of what's coming next.
Yeah.
There are other pillars of culture,
Yeah.
you know, sports, fashion, kitchen, you know, like there are different movements. But they all typically, for some reason, seem to follow what's happening in music.
Yeah.
So that's why I'm always curious.
Religion, soccer, and music.
Yes.
Come on, the 3 things that move this world.
Exactly. So it's a good kind of paradigm shift. And I think what we're going to be seeing more of is, you mentioned it, right? But those fusions. I'm curious on, you know, what are the things that we can do, you know, to add? You're already doing a ton, and we've talked about a couple different things, but there's still that seems to be like that core focus on that traditional way of looking at the music industry.
Yeah.
And it's like, I don't know, is it different in New York, in LA? Is like, do we need to learn from them, or do we need to do our own thing?
I mean, I just think more people need to be stakeholders in it, you know? I think Miami needs to be weirder, needs to be grungier. We need more backyard parties, block parties. I mean, what Paradiso, shout out what Paradiso's doing here, incubating talent. I mean, recording sessions, like you guys, there's a lot of people who are involved in moving the needle, you know? I think amplifying the people who are doing things, you know, these are the people that are part of building our culture right now. I think that, you know, we need more. We need more, and we need to do things that I think also just like attract. There's so much tourism in Miami, and they're actually looking for how to find people like us and come to these parties. I think amplifying the audiences that we speak to is important.
What's the next step there? Because I feel like maybe we're doing too, you know, indie or I don't know, like, and then.
No, I mean, I guess it depends what the metrics are, right?
Yeah.
I mean, in my case, like, we try to, like, the band we just had on Friday, Femina, their Miami tour stop was Tigre.
Alejandro was there.
Oh yeah, that's right, he was there. Yeah. And I feel like there's something really special around, like, hosting a touring band and, like, that was their tour stop, you know? And now all of a sudden, like, I got 3 Argentine DMs of really cool indie bands, you know? And there's something to be said, like, that's how we put Miami on the map. It's these, like, really small wins, but consistency is super key, which is why, like, being burnt out is not cool. I'm taking a 2-week trip right now because I think that it doesn't serve anybody feeling like you're just got too much going on, you know? And I think recordings, events, showcases, parties, as a collective, like, all these ships rise together. I do think it's important that we support each other, you know? It's definitely something that the scene is, it's like, we all grow, you know? Yeah. And that's always felt very, like, true to me in a lot of ways, because I'm like, Jesus, like, how boring would the city be if there's only 1 or 2 people doing it, you know?
So there are a couple other things we need to touch on to make this even more real.
Very important things.
Very important things. Let's start with memes.
Yes.
You are the memes queen of my Instagram feed.
Presente. Here for public service.
So why did that obsession with memes come from? Like,
I mean, it's one of these things that it's like, also like music, it's a rabbit hole. And once you're there, there's like no letting go. And I now feel this like commitment to it. People expect it out of me. It's part of my brand.
Your personal brand?
Yeah. It's also just like...
Do you find them or people send them to you? Like,
it's all part of it. It's all part of the curatorial process.
So you find like really cool bands, yes. Really cool memes?
Yes. Memes keep the internet light, you know? The internet can be like a triggering place sometimes. So I like to just be a happy place on the internet.
Are there any tactics that you've learned through this journey that can help you flip that pain into kind of like your superpower?
Yeah. I mean, now when things don't happen for me, I'm like, thank you. Wasn't meant to happen. Like, you can get so excited around opportunities, which I put in air quotes.
So is it a narrative mentality thing, or is it more like a ritual thing?
It's like a resilience thing. Okay. I mean, I think when things don't happen the way you want them to, or, you know, you don't get treated in a certain way, like, I think it's just a matter of always understanding, like, there's lessons and things for you to learn. And I think when you feel like life is always happening for you, your perspective of how you react to life at any moment, you know, it's like, even when I hit traffic, I'm like, oh, I wasn't expecting to be in the car for 30 minutes. I'm going to make a playlist. I'm going to take a deep dive. Like, it's all around paradigm shifts, around like why things are happening, you know? And I think once that's a muscle, it's resiliency, and like constantly feeling like you're going to be okay, you're supported, things are happening for you. So many times, what do they say? Like, rejection is God's redirection. You've heard that one, no?
I wouldn't know.
Really?
No.
Oh, come on.
But I'm getting enlightened.
Yeah, well, these are just like Pinterest, Instagram quotes. You guys have heard that.
It's the meme lady. She knows.
Not a meme, but inspirational life quote. But yeah.
That's good, though.
Yeah.
How do we do things differently?
Yeah. We
really are against the grain in that sense. So every time we feel like we're doing something that White Claw would do.
Yeah.
We're wrong.
Yeah.
We fucked up. Like, we needed to do something different.
Yeah.
And it's really easy to fall for like perverse incentives.
Yeah. The great thing is you're asking the right questions, you know? That's half the battle, is like actually understanding that you want to position differently, that you want to do different. You know, I create out of a space, out of things that don't exist, voids. You know, that gets me really excited, because I have no desire to like follow and create something trendy or do something that's in. It's like, I actually don't care about any of that. Like, really what I'm most excited about is like, how can I be part of like creating and empowering a scene that feels like they have no home? Or, you know, I remember, like I said, I grew up in the Miami of people being like, people hate singer-songwriters in Miami. Nobody gives a shit about them. And I'm like, really? Is that true? Like, could that really be? And then I would do events, and I was proved differently. I mean, they're not massive amounts of people that come to them, but there are enough. You know? I'm like, if you can get 200 people that care about this thing, anything you're doing, it's worth doing, you know? I think it's just like what your metrics of success are.
You know, one of the big things about our conversation today is what's the vision? Like, you know, you and I, you know, we're sitting down 15 years from now when Casalú is not a thing anymore. And
Blasphemy.
yeah, what's the vision for theater? Like, what's the dream?
You know, it's like I don't even know if I have a dream that's like so massive. It's more just like, it's funny, you described it as a feeling, and I really do feel connected to that. You know, it feels like it's a place for us in a way that we haven't felt, right? Welcomed, a place that we feel seen, connected. Incredible musicians are like pedestaled in spaces that it's almost like creating a yearning for something that you didn't even know that you were looking for, you know? And it's cool because it's taken a lot of shapes, you know? In some ways, it's a recording session, and sometimes it's a event, and sometimes, you know, we're shooting the shit, a happy hour. Like, there's so many different spaces of it. But I feel so proud to say that I've built this in Miami, you know? And I feel like, I'm sure you feel very similar in some ways. Like, there's something to be said that we're part of the entrepreneurs in Miami during this time, you know, really trying to, you know, make our mark in the world in the way that we feel like is aligned with our visions and our gifts. And I'll always be doing stuff with musicians. I'll always be empowering indie obscure scenes. And I think I just feel really committed to that. You know, I realized when pre-COVID, I wanted an empire. And now I'm like, fuck that. I want peace. And I want creativity. And I want fulfillment. And I want connection in a way that I can be present for it, you know? And I think your 20s is about building an empire. And your 30s is all about building a life of fulfillment, you know? And I feel like I just want to always be surrounded by amazing, creative, talented people. Like, that to me is what's like the quality of my life. So I wish I had a better answer for you.
No, I mean, that's what you're amazing at. Like, I think for our team, one of the things that we crashed or got invited or whatever, it was when you did the Chris Cab.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Someone invited us. We didn't know it was a theater-related thing. We're like, okay, this is awesome. Then suddenly freaking Pharrell shows up. And we're like, what the hell is happening? Like,
I'm glad you were there for that. I forgot you guys were there. That's right. Yeah.
So it was interesting because we had recently been at theater, which was, like you said, it is a feeling. It is a identity that we feel it's so critical. That it's so freaking critical. You walk in, there is a jam, everybody's enjoying every single second of it, and you can walk to the artist and say, I love your art.
Yeah.
That is rare.
Yeah, musicians really feel seen in the space, which is cool because, I mean, I've been booking bands in Miami for over a decade. They played to hotel lobbies that nobody gives a shit about. And, you know, you, like, begin to talk to them, and you're like, you've had Grammy nominations. Like, some of these people are so, you know, they have so many accolades. And they can, like, really not be seen in Miami, you know? And I think there's just something really refreshing about being in a space where they're not on a microphone. It's that true dialogue in a lot of ways is what the jams feel like.
Yeah.
It's like a mutual reciprocation.
Grammys. You're going to the Grammys.
Yeah, so are you.
Soon. There's been a lot of debate around not only Latin Grammys, but just Grammys in general. And these awards, in a sense.
Yeah.
What should people be listening to right now? What's your
shameless plug?
Shameless plug.
We have a Data Zen playlist with all of our recordings, which I would love. We can link wherever the link gets populated. Right there, okay. And there's all kinds of stuff on there. There's flamenco, there's R&B and Espanol, there's a little bit of everything. So
beautiful. Closing comments. I mean,
we could be here all night. I'm down. This is a good combo.
But you have to go to Sicily, right?
Unfortunately, I must go.
which we'll leave it for Ella. So, Isabella, where did the name come from? Why did you pick Isabella?
I was living in Barcelona. I got really inspired. Remember, I changed my name.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Why
I was just
Isabella
inspired. I don't
and
know.
not,
It was like one of my...
Maria?
No sé. Me vino como algo siempre fue un nombre que me encantó. And I was just drawn to it. And it felt like an alter ego. And I was like, why wait another life to be called what I want to be called now? People get tattoos. I changed my name.
Do you have a favorite movie?
I love Marvel movies. I love the Bourne Identity trilogy.
Tell me about
that. I mean, I've just always been into like FBI conspiracy shit. Like the Bourne Identity trilogy is so good. I mean, you've watched it, yeah? Yeah. I mean, it's just like something he's so
Matt Damon?
Yeah, he's killer. I mean, I just love movies like that. I'm always like political. What is it? Political controversy and like.
So it's like people are getting this person, they're like out to get him.
Yeah, I love that stuff.
Okay.
Psychological thrillers, not horror film, also.
All right.
And like a Vicky Cristina Barcelona, let's throw that in there too. A nice
Cristina
Woody Allen
Barcelona.
lighthearted movie.
Well, that's kind of where I think we think that knowing a person's favorite movie tells you a lot about them.
I love alternate truth seekers. No, I'm just kidding. I don't really know. I mean, I love living in worlds of, I don't know, just like, I mean, I love Marvel to, Woody Allen movies.
Spider-Man or Hulk or...
I love them all. I love Marvel movies.
Any favorites?
They're all, the Avengers, they're all great. I don't know. It's like, just, they're really well done, you know?
Thank you for coming to the Casalú podcast.
Thank you for having me. You are an amazing storyteller. Cheers to that.
Salud.
Salud.
Casalú.